Emma Foster stood in the gleaming lobby of Foster Enterprises, clutching her worn resume, while trying to stop her hands from trembling. The 40-story glass and steel tower was a far cry from St. Catherine's Orphanage, where she had spent the first 18 years of her life. Now at 23, after putting herself through community college with multiple jobs and scholarships, she was here for an entry-level interview in the accounting department. She hadn't planned to apply at Foster Enterprises. The name coincidence had always made her uncomfortable, but her roommate had submitted her resume without telling her. The receptionist's voice cut through her thoughts. "Mr. Blake will see you now, Miss Foster." Emma followed the woman down a corridor lined with awards and photographs of a stern-faced man she recognized from business magazines. Alexander Foster, the billionaire CEO who had transformed his father's modest company into a global empire. His piercing blue eyes seemed to follow her as she walked past each portrait. The accounting manager, David Blake, was friendly but detached as he reviewed her qualifications. "Your grades are exceptional, Miss Foster, but we typically hire from top business schools." "I understand that, sir, but what I lack in pedigree, I make up for in determination and work ethic." Emma leaned forward. "I've been supporting myself completely since I aged out of the system. I've never missed a day of work or failed to meet a deadline." Mr. Blake's expression softened slightly. "The system? Foster care. I grew up in St. Catherine's Orphanage." She managed a small smile. "Ironic that I'd end up interviewing at a company with the same name." The interview continued, but Emma noticed that Blake seemed distracted after her mention of the orphanage. When they finished, instead of showing her out, he asked her to wait. "There's been a change of plans, Miss Foster. Mr. Alexander Foster has requested to meet all potential new hires today. If you don't mind waiting." Emma's heart raced. The CEO wanted to meet entry-level candidates? That seemed unlikely, but she nodded and was led to a small conference room where she waited for nearly an hour, anxiety mounting with each passing minute. When the door finally opened, Alexander Foster himself walked in. In person, he was even more intimidating than his portraits, tall and broad-shouldered with salt-and-pepper hair and those same penetrating blue eyes, though Emma noticed fine lines around them suggesting he was in his mid-40s. His custom suit probably cost more than her entire year's rent. "Miss Foster." His voice was deep and controlled as he extended his hand. "I apologize for the wait." Emma stood quickly, nearly knocking over her chair. "It's no problem, Mr. Foster." He gestured for her to sit and took the chair across from her, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Mr. Blake tells me you grew up in St. Catherine's Orphanage." She nodded, wondering why the billionaire CEO would care about her background. "Yes, sir. I was there from infancy until I aged out at 18. "And your full name is Emma Rose Foster?" Something in his tone made her heart skip. "Yes, sir. Though I don't know if Rose was my birth name or one the nuns gave me." Alexander Foster's expression remained impassive, but Emma noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped his pen. "When exactly were you born, Miss Foster?" "April 17th, 2002. Her curiosity finally overcame her nervousness. "Sir, may I ask why you're interested in my background? Is this standard for all applicants?" He ignored her question and continued, "Do you know anything about your birth parents?" Emma shifted uncomfortably. "Only that my mother left me at the orphanage with just a blanket and a note saying her name is Emma Rose. Nothing about my father. The Foster surname was assigned to me by the state." She hesitated, then added tentatively, "Sir, I didn't apply here because of the name. It was actually my roommate who submitted my resume." Alexander's expression changed subtly. "I believe you, Miss Foster." He paused, studying her face. "Has anyone ever told you that you have very distinctive eyes?" "Yes, sir. The unusual color. The nuns used to call them violet." She felt increasingly bewildered by this strange conversation. "My mother had eyes that color." His words hung in the air between them. Emma's breath caught. "Sir, I don't understand what's happening here." Alexander Foster stood abruptly. "Miss Foster, I'd like to offer you a position, but not in accounting. I need a personal assistant, someone I can trust. The salary is triple what the accounting position offers." Her mind reeled. "But you don't know me. Why would you trust me?" "Let's just say I have a strong intuition about people." He handed her his business card with a private number written on the back. "Think about it over the weekend. Call me Monday with your decision." As she stood to leave, dizzy with confusion, she blurted out, "Mr. Foster, this is very strange. Why would you offer such a position to someone with no experience?" He looked at her for a long moment. Sometimes, Miss Foster, life presents us with unexpected connections. He opened the door but paused before she walked through. One more question. Was there anything else left with you at the orphanage? Anything at all? Just a small silver locket, but it was empty. I still have it. Something flashed in his eyes. Recognition. I'd very much like to see that locket someday. Walking out of Foster Enterprises into the bright spring afternoon, Emma felt as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted. Her mind raced with questions. Why was Alexander Foster so interested in her background? What did he see when he looked at her? And why did she have the unsettling feeling that he knew something about her that she didn't? That evening, Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, examining the tarnished silver locket, the only link to her past. On an impulse, she tried once again to open the tiny catch that had always seemed stuck. This time, pressing in a different spot, something clicked and the locket sprang open. Emma gasped. Inside was a tiny photograph she'd never seen before. A much younger Alexander Foster, with his arm around a beautiful dark-haired woman with violet eyes exactly like Emma's. With trembling fingers, she turned the locket over and noticed for the first time faint engraving on the back. She squinted to read the tiny script. To Rebecca, all my love, Alex. Emma's heart pounded as the impossible thought formed in her mind. She grabbed her laptop and searched for information about Alexander Foster's personal life. Most articles mentioned his reputation as a dedicated bachelor, but one older piece referred to a tragic personal loss 23 years ago that had turned him into a workaholic. 23 years ago, the year she was born. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I hope you'll accept the position, Emma. I think we have much to discuss. Alexander Foster. Emma stared at her reflection in the mirror, violet eyes wide with shock. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her phone and replied, Mr. Foster, I need to ask you something directly. Is there a reason why I have your last name? The response came almost immediately. I believe so, but this isn't a conversation for text messages. Can you meet me tomorrow? Emma barely slept that night, alternating between staring at the locket photo and researching everything she could find about Alexander Foster. There wasn't much about his personal life. He guarded his privacy fiercely, but she discovered that his mother's name had been Eleanor Foster, a philanthropist known for her work with children's charities until her death 10 years ago. Of Alexander's father, there was even less information. Just mentions of Richard Foster passing the company to his son 30 years prior. Of Rebecca, the woman Emma now suspected might be her mother, there was nothing. By morning, Emma had convinced herself she was making wild assumptions based on circumstantial evidence. The woman in the locket could be anyone, a sister, a cousin, a former girlfriend. The timing of that personal loss could be coincidental. Still, her hands trembled as she dressed for her meeting with Alexander Foster. She chose her most professional outfit, a navy blue dress she'd splurged on for interviews, and pinned her dark hair back neatly. The silver locket hung around her neck, its weight now seeming far heavier than its small size would suggest. Alexander had texted an address that led not to Foster Enterprises, but to an elegant brownstone in the historic district. A housekeeper answered Emma's nervous knock and led her to a sunlit study, where Alexander stood gazing out a large window, hands clasped behind his back. Thank you for coming, Emma. He turned, looking more human somehow in casual clothes, dark jeans and a grey cashmere sweater, than he had in his corporate armor. He gestured to a sitting area. Would you like some tea? Emma perched on the edge of a leather armchair. I'd prefer answers, Mr. Foster. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Direct. That's good. He sat across from her. I see you're wearing the locket. Emma's hand went to it instinctively. I got it open last night. There's a picture inside. A picture of you and a woman with eyes like mine. Alexander nodded slowly. Rebecca. Rebecca Sullivan. His voice softened on the name. We were very much in love once. Was she my mother? Emma asked bluntly. I believe so, yes. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But I didn't know about you, Emma. Not until yesterday when Blake mentioned an interviewee from St. Catherine's named Foster, with unusual violet eyes. That's why I had to see you for myself. Emma's mind raced. But if you and Rebecca were together and she was pregnant, how could you not know? Pain flickered across Alexander's face. We had a complicated relationship. Rebecca came from nothing. A scholarship student working 3 jobs to put herself through school. I was already running Foster Enterprises, already wealthy. My father, he paused. My father was a controlling man who believed the Fosters should only associate with certain families. When he discovered I was serious about Rebecca, he threatened to disown me. And you chose your inheritance, Emma concluded, a bitter edge to her voice. No. Alexander's response was sharp. I chose Rebecca. We were going to leave together. I had plans to start over, build something new without my father's money. But the night we were supposed to meet, she never showed up. She left a letter saying she couldn't destroy my future, that she was ending things for my own good. His eyes grew distant. I searched for her for months, but she disappeared completely. 6 months later, I learned she'd died in a car accident. Emma's breath caught. When? April 12, 2002, 5 days before her birth. Emma felt dizzy, the room seeming to tilt around her. I never knew she was pregnant, Alexander continued quietly. The thought never even occurred to me. After her death, I threw myself into work, built Foster Enterprises into what it is today. I never married. Emma stood abruptly, pacing the room. This is a lot, but it still doesn't explain why I have your last name if nobody knew you were my father. And why would my mother leave me at an orphanage when I had living family? Alexander rubbed his temple. I have a theory about that. Rebecca knew my mother volunteered at St. Catherine's. Eleanor Foster was there several days a week for years. I think Rebecca left you where she knew my mother would see you. But with the Foster name, wouldn't that have been obvious? Not necessarily. Foster isn't an uncommon surname, and the orphanage often assigned surnames to abandoned children. My mother never mentioned any baby with violet eyes. His expression darkened. Though now I wonder if perhaps she did know and kept it from me. Emma sank back into the chair, overwhelmed. So you're saying you think you're my father? I'd like to find out for certain. Would you consent to a DNA test? She nodded slowly. Yes, I'd want to know. Something like hope flickered in Alexander's eyes. He reached into his desk and removed a small box, handing it to Emma. I found this among my mother's things after she died. I never understood its significance until now. Inside was a tiny pink baby sock with Emma Rose embroidered on the cuff. Emma's hands shook as she held the delicate item. She knew about me. Your mother knew. It appears so. Alexander's voice was tight with controlled emotion. Which means she chose to keep you from me. Another betrayal in a lifetime of them. They sent for DNA tests that day. While waiting for results, Emma learned more about Alexander Foster, how the cold, intimidating CEO portrayed in the media was just one facet of a complex man. He showed her photos of Rebecca Sullivan, told her stories of their brief time together, painting a picture of a brilliant, kind-hearted woman who'd sacrificed her own happiness out of misplaced nobility. She wanted to give you your birthright, Alexander explained, as they walked through the garden behind his home, but didn't realize I would have traded it all to know I had a daughter. The DNA results, expedited through Alexander's connections, arrived within days, confirming what both had already accepted emotionally. Alexander Foster was indeed Emma's biological father. What happens now? Emma asked as they sat in his study, the official report between them. That depends on what you want, Alexander replied carefully. I've missed 23 years of your life. I can't get those back. But moving forward, if you're willing, I'd like to be part of your life, not as your boss, but as your father. Emma studied him, this powerful man who suddenly seemed vulnerable. I've spent my whole life wondering where I came from, who I belonged to. I'd like to know you, to understand that part of myself. Relief washed over Alexander's features. I'd like that too. But, Emma added firmly, I don't want special treatment. I still want to work, to earn my own way. You are definitely Rebecca's daughter, he said with a sad smile. How about a compromise? Take the position as my assistant, temporarily. It will give us time together, and you can learn about the company from the inside. After that, if you're still interested in accounting, I promise not to interfere. As Emma considered his offer, her phone chimed with a text. Looking down, she saw it was from Marcus, a coffee shop owner she'd been dating casually for a few months. The message read, "Miss you. Coffee soon." Alexander noticed her expression change. Something wrong? No, just... Emma hesitated. It's complicated. I've been seeing someone, but with everything happening, I don't know how to explain all this. To her surprise, Alexander's face darkened. Anyone serious about you should be willing to understand your circumstances. Who is this person? His name is Marcus Chen. He owns a small coffee shop where I used to study. Emma tucked her phone away. We've only been dating for a few months, but he's kind and hardworking. Alexander's expression remained guarded. I'd like to meet him sometime. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Emma smiled nervously. I'm still processing all of this. Finding out I have a father, a billionaire father at that, isn't something I can just casually mention over coffee. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind as Emma started working as Alexander's assistant. She moved from her cramped apartment shared with 3 roommates into a guest suite in Alexander's brownstone. A temporary arrangement, she insisted, until she found her own place. The media caught wind of a mysterious new assistant, always at Alexander Foster's side, leading to speculation that Emma was his latest girlfriend, a rumor that both found uncomfortably amusing given the truth. Emma proved herself exceptionally capable, quickly learning the intricacies of Alexander's business and personal affairs. She discovered they shared not only violet eyes, but also analytical minds and dry senses of humor. Alexander found himself increasingly proud of this poised young woman, who was so clearly a blend of himself and Rebecca. However, the more time Emma spent in Alexander's world, the more she noticed troubling patterns. His inner circle treated him with fearful deference rather than respect. Business rivals spoke of his ruthless tactics. Former associates warned her in hushed tones about his legendary temper. He wasn't always like this, said Patricia Winters, his longtime executive assistant who was training Emma before her retirement. After Rebecca died, something hardened in him. Then, when his father passed and he took full control, that hardness just spread. Emma began quietly investigating, reviewing old company records and news articles. She discovered a pattern of aggressive corporate takeovers, particularly targeting companies owned by the Sullivan family, her mother's family. In fact, Foster Enterprises seemed to have systematically acquired and dismantled every business with Sullivan connections over the past 20 years. When she casually mentioned the Sullivan name during dinner one evening, Alexander's hand tightened around his wineglass. Where did you hear that name? I was looking through some acquisition records, Emma replied carefully. You seem to have had a particular interest in their holdings. Business is business, he said tersely. The Sullivans were competitors. But his reaction only fueled Emma's suspicions. That night, she slipped into Alexander's home office and accessed his private files using skills she'd learned from watching him enter his passwords. What she found chilled her. A decades-long vendetta against the Sullivan family, whom Alexander blamed for Rebecca's death. Rebecca hadn't died in a random car accident. She'd been driving to meet her parents when her car was forced off the road. The police had ruled it an accident, but Alexander had spent millions on private investigations that suggested foul play, potentially orchestrated by Rebecca's own father, James Sullivan, who had vehemently opposed her relationship with Alexander. The next file made Emma gasp. Alexander believed James Sullivan had known about Rebecca's pregnancy and had been trying to force her to terminate it, to eliminate a foster heir. In Alexander's mind, this made James responsible not only for Rebecca's death, but also for separating him from his unborn child. His revenge had been systematic and complete. The destruction of the Sullivan family fortune, the dismantling of their business empire, and the public disgrace of James Sullivan, who had died in poverty 5 years ago. Emma's hands trembled as she closed the files. Her grandfather had potentially tried to prevent her birth, and her father had destroyed her mother's family in retaliation. Where did that leave her? The next morning, she confronted Alexander in his study. You destroyed my mother's family. He didn't deny it. They destroyed mine first. I'm part Sullivan too, Emma said quietly. Does that make me your enemy as well? Pain flashed across Alexander's face. You're nothing like them. You're Rebecca's daughter, and mine. But I have their blood, and none of their cruelty, Alexander insisted, pacing the room. James Sullivan was a monster who controlled Rebecca her entire life. When she defied him by choosing me, he couldn't bear it. My investigators found evidence he hired men to run her off the road that night. Evidence that never convinced the police, Emma pointed out, because he had them in his pocket. Alexander's voice rose, his composure cracking. You don't understand what kind of man he was. Maybe not, Emma conceded, but I do understand that you've spent my entire lifetime consumed by hatred and revenge, instead of looking for me. The accusation hit Alexander like a physical blow. I told you. I didn't know about you. But you suspected. You just said your investigators found evidence about that night. Did none of them mention Rebecca was nearly 8 months pregnant when she died? Did no one think to check what happened to her baby? Emma's voice broke. Or were you so focused on revenge that you never asked the right questions? Alexander sank into a chair, his face ashen. My investigators told me she died at the scene. The police report made no mention of a child. Because the Sullivans covered it up, came a new voice from the doorway. Both turned to see Marcus Chen standing there, his familiar face now hard with purpose, a manila envelope in his hand. How did you get in here? Alexander demanded, rising to his feet. Marcus ignored him, focusing on Emma. I've been trying to find the right time to tell you, Emma. I'm not who you think I am. Emma stared at him in confusion. What are you talking about, Marcus? My real name is Marcus Sullivan. James Sullivan was my grandfather. Rebecca was my aunt. He stepped further into the room. I've been looking for you for years. The revelation hit Emma like a thunderbolt. You knew who I was all along? Our relationship was a lie? Marcus shook his head urgently. Not a lie. Finding you was the mission, but falling for you was real. He turned to Alexander, his expression hardening. You destroyed our family based on lies. My grandfather never harmed Rebecca. He was trying to protect her from you. Alexander lunged forward, but Emma stepped between them. Explain, now. Marcus opened the envelope, spilling photographs onto the table. Rebecca discovered something about Foster Enterprises. Illegal dealings, money laundering for organized crime. When she confronted Alexander, he threatened her. He pointed to Alexander. He was the one who sent men after her that night, not my grandfather. That's absurd, Alexander sputtered. I loved Rebecca. You loved controlling her, Marcus countered. And when she fled with evidence against you and your company, you couldn't allow that. Emma's world spun as she looked between these two men, both potentially family, both potentially liars. I need to know the truth, all of it. The tension in the room was palpable as Emma stood between the two men who claimed to be her family. Alexander Foster, the billionaire who had only recently discovered he was her father, and Marcus Sullivan, the man she'd been falling for, who now revealed himself as her cousin. Both of you sit down, Emma commanded with unexpected authority. When they hesitated, her violet eyes flashed. Now, surprisingly, both men complied, taking seats at opposite ends of the study. Emma remained standing, arms crossed. For my entire life I've had no family, she said evenly. Now suddenly I have too much, and you're both telling completely different stories. One of you is lying. Perhaps both of you are. She looked first at Marcus. You said you have evidence. Show me everything, not just selected photos meant to persuade me. Marcus hesitated before spreading out the contents of his envelope on the coffee table. These are copies of Rebecca's personal journals. She documented everything. Her relationship with Alexander, her pregnancy, and the threats she received when she discovered illegal activities at Foster Enterprises. Emma picked up the journals, noting the handwriting that matched the few samples Alexander had shown her from old letters. And you, Alexander, what proof do you have of your version? Alexander's jaw tightened. In my safe. Private investigator reports, police records I had to fight to obtain. He crossed to a painting on the wall, swung it aside to reveal a hidden safe and entered a combination. From inside he withdrew a thick folder. For the next 2 hours, Emma pored over both sets of documents in silence while the men watched anxiously. The journals detailed Rebecca's fear of Alexander's growing obsession with her, his controlling behavior, and her discovery of documents linking Foster Enterprises to money laundering operations. The final entry, dated just days before her death, mentioned her plan to flee with evidence and seek protection from her family. Alexander's files, however, contained financial records showing massive payments from Sullivan Industries to known criminal elements around the time of Rebecca's death, along with witness statements placing James Sullivan's car near the accident scene. Both sets of evidence can't be true, Emma finally said, looking up with troubled eyes. Yet both seem convincing. Because one set was fabricated, came an elderly voice from the doorway. All three turned to see Patricia Winters, Alexander's retiring assistant, standing there with a small leather case. Patricia? Alexander rose, confusion evident on his face. What are you doing here? Fulfilling a promise I made 23 years ago. The older woman stepped into the room, her normally deferential manner replaced with quiet determination. I've worked for you for 30 years, Alexander. I was here when you met Rebecca. I watched you fall in love, and I've carried this secret far too long. Emma felt a chill run through her. You knew about me. Patricia nodded solemnly. I knew everything. I was the one who helped your mother escape that night. Alexander's face drained of color. What are you saying? Neither of you has the full truth, Patricia continued, opening the leather case to reveal a sealed letter and an old USB drive. Rebecca wasn't running from you, Alexander, nor was she being threatened by her father. She discovered something far worse. Your father, Richard Foster, was the one behind the criminal enterprises. When Rebecca found proof, Richard threatened not just her, but you as well. My father, Alexander whispered. Rebecca knew you would never believe accusations against your father without proof. She was gathering evidence to convince you when Richard's men discovered what she was doing. Patricia handed the letter to Emma. This is for you from your mother. I was to deliver it when you turned 25, but events have forced my hand. With trembling fingers, Emma opened the letter, reading aloud. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then Patricia has found you and I'm gone. I want you to know that leaving you was the most painful decision of my life, but it was the only way to protect you and your father. Alexander's father discovered my pregnancy and saw it as the perfect leverage. He threatened to kill Alexander if I didn't disappear. To ensure I would comply, he promised to find and kill our child as well, should I ever contact Alexander again. I chose to fake my death and leave you somewhere I hoped you would eventually be found by Eleanor Foster, Alexander's mother, whom I had come to trust. I gave you the Foster name, in hopes it might one day lead you back to your father. The evidence against Richard Foster is on the enclosed drive. I pray by the time you receive this, the danger has passed. Know that I loved you and your father with all my heart, and my greatest regret is not seeing you grow up together. All my love, Rebecca. A heavy silence filled the room. Alexander sat motionless, his world crumbling around him as decades of belief were upended in moments. The accident was staged, Patricia explained quietly. Rebecca survived and went into hiding, but she was severely injured. She died from complications 6 months later, but not before giving birth to you, Emma. Her family helped fake the records to protect you both. Marcus looked stunned. My father always said grandfather was protecting a secret about Rebecca. I assumed. He trailed off, shame evident in his expression. The Sullivans knew only that Rebecca was in danger from the Fosters. They didn't know the full story, Patricia continued. They kept Emma's existence secret, even from most of their own family. Only when Foster Enterprises began destroying Sullivan businesses did they fear Alexander had somehow discovered Emma and was exacting revenge. That's when Marcus was sent to find and protect you. Emma moved to the window, overwhelming emotions washing over her. So my entire life has been shaped by lies and misunderstandings. Alexander destroyed my mother's family, believing they killed her, while they believed he was the threat all along. And my father, Alexander said hollowly, was the true villain. He kept me from both of you. He looked up at Emma, anguish in his eyes. Everything I've built, my entire life's purpose, was based on a lie. Emma turned to face him. Not everything. You built Foster Enterprises into something my mother would be proud of. You eliminated your father's criminal connections years ago, even if you didn't know you were doing it. I still destroyed innocent people, your family, in blind vengeance, Alexander replied, his voice breaking. Marcus stood, approaching them both. Perhaps it's time to rebuild instead. He extended his hand to Alexander. The Sullivans who remain would want to know Rebecca's daughter, and perhaps it's time to heal this rift, for her sake. Alexander hesitated before taking Marcus's hand. I've spent 23 years hating your family. It won't disappear overnight. I'm not asking for overnight, Marcus replied, just for a beginning. Emma watched this tentative truce with tears in her eyes. 2 months ago, she had been alone in the world, and now she had family. Complicated, flawed, but hers. 6 months later, Emma stood in the newly established Rebecca Sullivan Foundation offices, overseeing the charitable organization created to unite the Foster and Sullivan families in a common purpose. Alexander had dedicated significant resources to rebuilding what had been destroyed, while the remaining Sullivans contributed their expertise. As she arranged photos on her desk, Rebecca's recovered portrait, a picture of herself with Alexander, another with her Sullivan cousins, Marcus appeared in her doorway. "Ready for lunch?" he asked with a warm smile. Their relationship had evolved slowly, as they navigated their complicated family connections. DNA testing had revealed they were actually second cousins, not first as originally believed, and as they worked together on the foundation, their initial attraction had deepened into something profound. Almost, Emma replied, placing the final photo on her desk, one taken at last week's charity gala, showing Alexander, Emma, Marcus and Patricia, all smiling together. Marcus wrapped his arms around her waist, kissing her temple. "Your mother would be proud of what you've accomplished." "What we've accomplished," she corrected him, turning in his embrace, "healing old wounds, building something new." From his office across the hall, Alexander watched them with a complex mixture of emotions. The past year had forced him to confront painful truths and rebuild his understanding of his own life. Seeing Emma, Rebecca's daughter, his daughter, find happiness with Marcus brought both joy and bittersweet memories. As if sensing his thoughts, Emma looked up and met his gaze through the doorway. She smiled, that same radiant smile that had once captivated him on Rebecca's face, now lighting his daughter's. Alexander returned the smile, feeling the last pieces of his shattered heart begin to heal. In that moment, he could almost hear Rebecca's voice. "Our daughter found her way home, Alex, and she's brought us all home with her."